Welcome to the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Sir Jupil, and today I'd like to welcome everyone to John Matthews, President and CEO of Greycat Enterprises, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. John, I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Serge.
So tell me, that's a pretty fun name, Greycat Enterprises. How did that come about?
The funny thing is I give a lot of speeches and everything like that, and it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. The very first question that someone always asks is, "How'd you come up with the name Gray Cat?" So it's nothing more than I was sitting around trying to come up with a great name, and the gray cat walked by, and my son goes, "Well, Dad, you really like that?" He was like, I don't know, fifth grade or something like that. He goes, "Dad, you really like that cat? Why don't you? That would be kind of cool." And I go, "Yeah, gray cat. I kind of like that. That was a nice cat." So 22 years ago, I decided it was going to be called Greycat Enterprises. So that's nothing more than that. And then
Well,
I had one of my former employees design the logo. That used to work for me in my corporate days.
so uh, so you don't see that cat anymore.
No, unfortunately, no.
One and
That
done.
cat has been long gone.
So for those who are unfamiliar with Greycat Enterprises, please walk us through what you do and how you support businesses.
Well, I'm a management and operational consultant. So what that means is I focus in really on three things. I do strategic planning for companies. So I was with three high growth companies in my corporate days, seen the growth, I've seen the good, and I've seen the mistakes. And so I help companies that want to go from maybe 10 stores to 50 stores, kind of look around the corner saying this is what you should expect at 30, 40, and 50, and so on and so forth. And I'll help them write their strategic plan for that. The second thing that I do is I do senior project management. Think of me as like a vice president for hire, a larger company. They got a great project. All of their VPs are all busy doing their day jobs. They need someone who can hit the ground running, someone who doesn't need a lot of hand holding. They call Gray Cat. I go in, I'll work that project. Invariably, they find another project for me then, and then another project. And then, months turn into years. And I've been working for the same client actually as an adjunct VP. And then the third area is I'm an interim executive manager. You either have an underperforming chief marketing officer or your chief operating officer leaves, and all of a sudden you've got this gap, this void, and we need someone who can come in, hit the ground running, hold the fort together for the next 6 to 12 months until we go out and hire a full-time person. And I will act as that interim CMO or interim chief operating officer, or they'll go out and buy a division and they don't have anyone to run it. And they need someone who can be the general manager for that division down to the P&L level. And some of those gigs have actually lasted upwards of 3 years until they figure out what they want to do. They keep me on as an interim general manager managing those divisions. So those are really the three things: strategic planning, senior project management, and interim executive management.
I think we got to clone you, John. That's a lot of going on.
Well, I don't like to think of myself as like this management consultant who just comes in and pontificates. I'm actually the guy who actually comes in and looks at your P&L line by line saying, why are we spending this money on your phone system when, half the people are using their mobile phones, that type of thing. So that's what I do. I actually roll up my sleeves and run a division or run a project or actually get heavily involved in it. That's what I like doing.
That's so important because, you're bang on. Sometimes these companies just go on autopilot, right? And some of these legacy systems stay in place and they never question them, and the invoices keep coming in. And yeah, and there's a lot of efficiencies when fresh eyes like yours can come in and look at them and clean them up.
Yeah, and part of my process, especially on the interim gigs that I end up getting, is I'll go in and I'll talk to all the departments and talk to all the people to figure out kind of what is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'll talk to an analyst, and the analyst goes, "Well, I produced this report, and I produced this report, and this report," and I'm like, "Okay, that's great. Who reads this report?" And then you get into it a little bit and you realize that this guy works 2 hours a week on a report that nobody uses because they're getting their information over here. So, and I hear that from like the sales team say, "Oh, I never look at that report." Okay, well, then I can go back to that analyst and say, maybe you don't need to produce this report. Maybe we could reallocate your time and you could be doing something that people are truly using. And so with a fresh set of eyes, and again, without all that legacy and that I guess things that sometimes, oh, we've always done it that way type of philosophy. I can go in and kind of ask some silly questions and then find out what is really adding value to the enterprise and what is detracting from the value.
So, with those three kind of areas you supported that you mentioned, was that always the intent or did it kind of evolve that way over time?
It's evolved that way over time. I will tell you the project management, that was one of the reasons why I started Greycat. In my corporate days, I had huge roles. And I was in my 30s and just huge roles. And I was an administrator. I would just go from one administrative meeting to the next. And my job was to kind of keep people out of harm's way, make sure they weren't doing duplicative roles, help them navigate through the executive team to get their budgets approved and what have you. And I kind of missed doing the content. So when I started Grey Cat, I really wanted to get back into actually doing projects, going out and building, creating things like that. The strategic just made sense because, at Jimmy John's, we doubled the chain when I was there. At Little Caesars, we went from 1,300 to 5,000 stores in 5 years. At Clark, we went from 800 locations to 1,400 locations, mostly through acquisition. So it was a different type of growth. So that one made sense. In the last dozen years, I've gotten involved in the interim because people are going, the guy's got a great background. He's touched a lot of different industries. He's touched a lot of different departments. We could probably use him as kind of that general manager fill-in until we figure out what we need to do, and he can buy us time in being able to do that and find the right full-time solution. So that I think I've done 11 of those interim gigs in the last dozen years, and that to me is the most interesting thing because it's like they literally are coming to me with a 500 piece puzzle and dumping it on my desk saying, we've got an issue here, or we don't know anything about this because we just bought it. Can you put the puzzle together? Can you figure this out? Because we got other things that we need to do. And I'm like, I got it. Let me just run with this.
So how does that come out? Is that more word of mouth or they find you or you find them or do you see a company with expansion plans and do you approach them or how does that work?
A little bit of both. A couple of them been recommendations. Former colleagues know my background. They know what I can bring to the table. A couple of them were I was working with a company and on multiple projects, and then they go, we got this other thing over here. You think you could go over there and manage that? And then I go over and manage that, and then they go, oh, we got another division you can manage, and then another. At one point, I had one client that had me running 6 of their divisions at once, all across the country. 2 in Seattle, 1 in Los Angeles, 1 in Billings, Montana, 1 in Milwaukee, and 1 in Pensacola. And I would do this was pre-COVID, and so back in the day when you didn't do Zoom, you were traveling all the time. I
Yeah.
would travel that circuit 200,000 miles. In 2019, I did that on 175 different flights. I mean, and that's what I did. And I ran those divisions, and my job was the general manager of those divisions. I was in charge of the sales team, driving revenue, managing the expenses, managing the P&L, doing performance reviews, doing everything on behalf of my client.
So on the strategic planning side for looks like for some major franchises, what do you see they have in common, or do they, when it comes to when they're ready to pivot for some serious growth? Are there some common things you recognize?
Well, generally, a lot of the gigs I get for that come through private equity. And so private equity has made an investment in let's say a retail store. I had one that was car automotive repairs. Okay. And at the time, private equity came in. They had 32 locations. They wanted to get to 100 in 3 years. They had a CEO that was in place. She had never grown a chain that quickly. And they saw my background. They asked me to come in and kind of be her side person to help her over the next 18 months, position the company, make sure that we had the right people in place, make sure that we're thinking around the corner, like when you get to 60, how many supervisors do you need? What are some of the procedures that have to change and everything like that? So private equity will really want to accelerate the growth and accelerate their investment in a portfolio company, and they don't want to leave a lot to chance. They don't want to leave a CEO that is, figuring it out along the way. So they put someone like me to be in there, not as a co-CEO. She or he would still have the reins, but I'm a sounding board for them. Like, what would you do in this situation? Well, let me give you a couple different paths you could go, and this is what I would recommend, and so on and so forth. So that to me is where generally a lot of that high growth strategic work comes in. It's generally funneled through private equity.
So what does, John, a typical day look like for you? Or is every day different? Or do you start it the same way and have a routine?
My day from a routine standpoint starts the same way every day. I get up and walk 4 miles.
For you.
I've had three back operations, so it's my way of just keeping my back kind of limber. I go through my LinkedIn connections and spend probably 15 minutes on LinkedIn. And then the rest of the day is either talking to potential new clients or working on client business. I'm a staff of one. I like it that way. I've maintained that. The only exception would be is if I get involved in like building new stores, I bring in some colleagues that help me from an architectural standpoint and things like that. But when I started the company, I used to manage hundreds of people, and I didn't really want to have a company where I was back to managing. Even though some of these interim gigs, I'm right back into doing what I didn't want to do, and that's doing performance reviews and things like that. But that's how my day starts. It starts with a walk. It starts with LinkedIn. Then I just dive in and do podcasts, or I do a work for my clients, which I'll do after this podcast, or I'll do some prospecting. Like I had a prospecting call earlier before this podcast. So that's kind of what my day turns out to be. And then this week, I'm actually flying to Detroit to MC a convention for one of my clients. So it's quite an adventure that this company, Greycat, is.
So you've got a breadth of great experience, not only on the corporate side, but also supporting companies through Grey Cat. Is there something you're specifically proud of on either side or both? Like what really stands out for you in terms of that was really cool?
I had some great roles at my corporate uh, career that I had some mentors and some bosses that believed in me enough to throw me into the abyss. Like when I was at Clark, I went in as a marketing person. I headed up category management, which, you kind of go, what is that? That's all the Twinkies and cigarettes that you would have in a convenience store. It doesn't seem like a lot, but my division was 900 million in sales. So it was a big job. And so all the category managers would report to me and the merchandising folks. And then I had the marketing and I had corporate communications. So I had kind of a marketing focus. And then they asked me to run facilities. And I didn't know really what facilities was. And it was construction, it was repair and maintenance, it was environmental, it was purchasing, it was everything that had to do with the units. And so they threw me into the abyss and they said, you can handle this. Why don't you run this too? In addition to what I was already running. So I ran that. And then they gave me real estate. So now I had 1,400 properties and things like that. So from a corporate perspective, I was quite proud of the fact that anything they threw at me, I just figured it out. And then you realize that once they throw enough at you, that it's just another thing. Yeah, well, I'll just figure that out. Like I was the head of the IT committee. I was the chair of the IT committee. I was also the head of the capital committee. So after a while, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. So when I started Greycat, I can be working in the retail industry. I can work in business to business. I can work in IT. I can work in all these different industries. And probably, prior to starting Greycat, I might have been a little bit nervous about that. But now it's kind of like I have a healthcare client now. Well, it's like, whatever. It's the same thing. They have, things that they're producing. They're trying to sell a bunch of them. They're trying to keep their expenses down. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just they have a different product than a retail company or a B2B company or what have you. So the fact that I've been able to do that and the fact that I've been able to survive for 2+ decades doing it kind of my way where it's my company, it's me doing it. I've been able to balance all of the workloads of finding clients, getting paid by clients, doing the work for clients, things like that. It's pretty cool that I can say I've been doing it for a couple decades. I remember that when I first started, I met with a guy. I was 2 months into it, and he had been on his own for 26 months, and he told me that. And he goes, "Yep, 26 months I've been on my own." And I said, "Man, I'm thinking in the back of my head, I just want to be able to say that I've been alive doing this for 26 months, and now I'm up to 22 years." So I'm pretty proud of that.
Good for you. So having been in it for 22 years, John, what have you seen evolve in terms of the approach to business or what business requires or the tools they adopt? Like what have you seen really change?
There's always new tools that come to the forefront, and I know AI is like the latest and greatest shiny penny that everyone's all excited about. And rightly so. I mean, think about where we were. I mean, I started my company before LinkedIn even had started, before Facebook even started. That's how long my company's been going. I've been out there longer than YouTube, and things like that. And you kind of go, wow, those tools are like totally out there. And you've been out there. And so I've seen a lot of the tools coming into the fold. AI is a perfect example. It's a great tool. I mean, I use AI for a lot of the things that I do, but I also, if I have a great presentation that I want to have it translated into an article, I can put it through Chat GPT and it does it flawlessly. It's amazing. But I had to write all that great content initially and put it into the PowerPoint. If I were to just say, hey, write me an article about merchandising and it didn't have any John Matthews insights, it would be this generic article about merchandising that anyone could do. But when I actually give it the subject matter expertise, then it comes out a polished John Matthews report on merchandising. I liken it to like LinkedIn. I get 95% of all my business through LinkedIn. There are a billion people on LinkedIn. A lot of them, a good portion of them don't make a dime off of LinkedIn because it's a tool and they just think that stuff just going to come from the tool. You have to kind of feed the tool, and I feed it with content and I feed it with credibility statements and I feed it with reasons for people to think of me when they have a project, as opposed to, hey, I've been on LinkedIn for 20 years. I don't get any business out of it. Well, you're not feeding it. It's the same thing with AI. If you don't feed it your content, you're going to get the generic version of AI that anyone can do. You're not separating yourself. You're just part of the noise.
That's so I want to really emphasize that because especially when using AI for content, yes, absolutely. The more of your tone, your expertise, your direction you give it, the more it can flex its muscles and really get into, okay, I understand what John needs because he's provided me the right insight. For people who just enter a plain prompt, it's trying to guess at what you need. So good on you for really leveraging your expertise to make the most of the tool.
Yes. And it's the same thing with any tool that I've seen over the last 20, 30, 40 years. If you just sit there and expect to press a button and it's magically going to give you something that's unique to you as opposed to the other 8 billion people on this planet who could press that button, you're kidding yourself. So it's all about what you have to give to any tool for the tool to be able to optimize it for you. And LinkedIn is the perfect example of all of my business seems to come from LinkedIn, the tool, but I have fed the tool that enables it to give me the leads and give me visibility to folks that perhaps hadn't known me or had forgotten about me, and now I'm reminding them.
So, on the subject of automation and AI, what problems do you think AI or automation can solve for a business like yours or the clients you serve?
It makes it easier for me to take, like, I spent, a business trip a couple months ago where I gathered up a whole bunch of notes over the course of 2 or 3 days. And, I could have sat there and tried to organize it and everything like that, but I was able to feed it into AI and it helped organize it for me. It helped me articulate narratives around. Maybe I put a spreadsheet in there and I say, hey, write me a narrative explaining this spreadsheet, and it does that. But I had to give them or give them. I'm thinking like AI's like some man behind a curtain, but I had to give AI the information on the spreadsheet. So I had to figure out what I wanted on the spreadsheet for that tool to interpret it. And so to me, it makes the recapping of a lot of stuff that perhaps I was doing more manually 5, 10 years ago. It makes the recap much quicker. I write articles for publications. I can sit there and write the article because I have the content in my head or I have it in a spreadsheet or I have it someplace. But now I'm actually taking this content that I might have had in a different format. Like I built a beautiful PowerPoint presentation that has my content in it for a particular subject. And now I can ask AI to translate everything that's in that PowerPoint into an article. So now all I've taken is just the same content. I've just put it in a different tool that I can then use for, publishing in a magazine or something like that. It's just made that a lot simpler. I've gone from 2 hours of writing it's 10 minutes and then I'm reviewing it to see if it's accurate.
Yeah, it's such a great point. We used to spend so much time on content production, and content production now means different things, but just, developing documents or presentations, or even social media content. And now all of that can be so streamlined with just a little bit of direction. But, between yourself,
Let me just interject one more thing. I have so much content in my laptop right now that I have I've got 200 or 300 blogs that I've written over. I'm not exaggerating, probably 500 to 1,000 PowerPoint decks that I have put together that are still relevant. So to be able to have that housing of John Matthews Greycat content at my disposal, and all I'm using is AI to put it into a different format. That's like the golden goose right there. That to me is just that's amazing, because now I don't even have to have AI figure out the content, because I have the content, and that's why people hire me and hire Greycat. It's because they're hiring the guy who has the content or has the ability to solve their issues. And so now I'm just simply using AI just to make it in a different format that perhaps I would have spent hours translating a PowerPoint deck into a written article.
that content is so valuable, isn't it? It reminds me.
Totally is.
I had a somebody asked me. He's in a similar business again, like you, does great content, and he's like, Serge, I'd love to have a library of my content attached to some AI platform where I just put in. I need to put in a recommendation for this company that has this problem, and that can go into all of his content and extract his expertise that he's developed over the years into some presentation that will go from researching and looking into his document folders and different projects to streamlining all of his information to his own sort of AI search engine. So I think that could be the next really cool tool.
You know what? Probably is. I mean, yeah, I'm already seeing it. I've been playing around with it, and I'm already seeing, like, when I pull out an old presentation, it's as though it gets refreshed on the translation to a different, I guess, vehicle. So to take a presentation and put it into an article, it's almost getting to the point where it's taking certain buzzwords that I have in there, and it's actually making it sound even better. Because I'm usually on a presentation, I'm usually short on the bullets. It's like they're not full sentences, it's just short. And now it's taking it and actually putting it into a nice sentence. And when you read it, you're kind of going, yeah, okay, I kind of get the story here, as opposed to trying to translate it off of a slide. So it's kind of interesting.
That's interesting. I read something, well, this was actually probably 6 months ago, but it really resonated with me. Something related to that, where big picture thinkers tend to have less bullets, and more detail-oriented people have more thorough presentations. But if you're a big picture guy, you're like, "We need A, B, C, and we'll fill in the details later, but this is what we need to focus on."
Well, the way it's so we're talking about maybe two different things here, because when I do public speeches, as opposed to like a podcast or writing for articles, when I do public speeches, the last thing I want is so many words on a slide that no one is even listening to what I'm saying, because they're spending all their time trying to read what's on the slide, or they're not reading and they're falling asleep. That type of thing. So I always keep my slides very brief, very, colorful, and graphics to kind of keep people excited. And then I fill in the gaps and I have this rule of thumb. It's everything's a minute or less on each slide. So you're really kind of rolling through the slides. And I'm telling stories that's accentuating, or, just kind of pulling out the bullets. And I'm filling it in with anecdotes, and I'm filling it in with stories, and I'm ad-libbing it. And I'm a storyteller throughout this entire presentation. And all I have are those bullets up there. And those bullets are my reminder to go, oh, I need to tell this story on this slide. And then when we get to the next slide, it's a trigger for me to go, oh, now it's this story. And I'm just kind of filling in the blanks for the audience. And they may be reading the slide. They're probably listening to my story, because it's going to be more humanized and it's going to be more anecdotal, as opposed to, and on slide 2, you see this bullet and I'm reading the bullet to them. No one wants that. So that to be able to take kind of that thought process and actually then put it into a little bit more, I guess, stretched out article in written form as opposed to just simply a bunch of bullets is quite remarkable that it can do that.
So, in your experience with big players like Papa John's or Little Caesars or some of the companies you work with now, are there common things you see or you look at and say, why are we still doing this and not automating it? You know, if it's, let's say, social media content or if it's hiring practices or booking appointments, is there a common thread you see that we're spending too much manual time on some things?
Well, that's the beauty of when I do these interim gigs, because I'm walking in with a blank slate. I mean, my client has filled me with enough working knowledge of why I'm there, some of the buzz things that I have to look at, and talk to Billy over there. He's the problem child or whatever. They're gonna tee me up on certain things that I need to address, but I literally go in with a blank slate, and I'm like, all right, tell me everything that's working really well. Tell me all the things that are working so so. Tell me all the things that are terrible here. And my job is to take all those additional puzzle pieces and figure out the best path forward. And while I'm doing that, trying to win over the team, because I'm an interim guy, no one knows who I am. And so I need to win over the team. And a lot of the cases when I'm assigned an interim gig, it's not a happy place. It's either they've just been purchased by another company and they're scared to death. Their general manager has just been fired, and I've been asked to go in and kind of clean things up. So not only are they, maybe financially not doing well, but culturally you're dealing with all of that. And I'm a guy that no one knows, and I'm the man from the moon, and I come walking in like, okay, I gotta create some credibility here. I gotta listen. I gotta show that I'm here to help. So I get a whole, fire hose full of data coming at me, and it's my job to take it all, figure out what needs to be addressed, organize it, throw it against a timeline, and then slowly but surely win over the team to have them buy into the vision going forward. And so that's really, I guess, the major thing that you have to address is that you have to figure out all of the pieces and what's working and what's not working and what's duplicative and everything like that before you can actually put forth a plan and solve the client's issues.
So speaking of solving client issues, now you were recently in my neck of the woods in Vancouver, so you're supporting clients outside of the USA now, yes?
Yes. Yes. Well, I have one client that's based in the US, but we had one franchisee that's actually based in Canada that I went to visit last week.
Great. So in terms of what the future holds for you, John, where do you want to be 6 or 12 months from now? Stay in the course, or are you thinking of fine tuning how you go to market, or spending more time in one of the three verticals you mentioned?
No, it's probably pretty much the same. I've got something on my website called the Greycat Learning Series. I have 15 online courses, and it's kind of nice. I've got companies that are interested in that because if they're like a retail company, maybe they have 20 locations. They don't have a full-fledged training department, but they want to educate their retail leaders. So they will subscribe to this Great Cat Learning Series, and sometimes it's just recorded courses that they see. Sometimes they have me come in. I did one last year for a convenience store operator that had, I think, 30 or they had 15 locations, but they brought in not only the general manager, they brought in the assistant manager. So they had like 30 people in attendance and they were close by. So I did four live stations, one each quarter. And then in between the other 2 months of the quarter, they did a recorded course to help educate their retail managers. And so I get people that do that, and I get people that just sign up for the courses. They're in, Taiwan or something like that, and they hear about me and they sign up for a profit and loss course for 40 minutes and they pay me $100, and that's the way it goes. I've got that kind of running on autopilot, which is kind of nice. I've got clients that I'm doing work for, and that was the reason why I was in Vancouver last week. I sit on a board too, so I've got board work that I do with that. So quite candidly, I'm pretty happy. I got a great balance in my life. I work with some fabulous people. I've got some residual income coming in through the Great Cat Learning Series, in addition to having client work that I enjoy working on.
And you get to play golf once in a while.
Play golf once in a while. Yeah, that's part of the balance.
That's the key, 100%. If you could solve one major challenge for your company or the companies you support, what would that be?
Well, I try, that's why I get hired is I try to solve the challenges that my companies have. The amazing thing to me is that the reason why I get hired is because companies are not that efficient. They have glitches in their processes and everything like that. And I've just made a living and trying to solve those issues that big companies are just too close to it, or they've got competing priorities, or what have you, to try to figure out how do we solve this? I've done projects like we have excess inventory in all of our warehouses that's been sitting there for not months, but years. How do we get rid of this inventory? And they don't have anyone that they can assign because they basically all have day jobs. So they bring in someone like me who says, you work with all these warehouses and try to figure out how to get rid of inventory. And so I did that for 4 years for one of my clients, and we were able to whittle down the inventory significantly. I also have a client that had issues with their accounts receivable. People that owed them money for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Big company too that was so far behind on the receivables. So they asked me to come in and say, is there a way that you can work with all of these different offices to help them not be a collector of money, but help them figure out who they need to contact to get the money and how we have to structure that. And so I help them collect money on accounts receivable. So a lot of the projects I get, it's not that the companies aren't smart or anything like that, but sometimes you get so far away from their regular business that some of their processes aren't tight and they break down and no one's looking at it. And all of a sudden, you've got an issue that's been festering for 2 years because no one was watching it. And I get called to say, you know what, we need a guy like you who can come in and help us kind of clean this area up. And then once you do that, we'll probably have another area that we don't even know about today that will be festering over here. You can go over there and help clean that one up. And then, oh, we got another division over here that you can go run or whatever. So that's how I get hired is there's just a lot of puzzle pieces that companies have that they don't have anyone there to solve the puzzle.
So, John, for those watching this, and especially, when I post on LinkedIn, there'll be companies of various sizes watching this. Is there an ideal size of company? I don't know, 50 to 100 employees, or whatever that may be that you're best suited to serve.
I'm probably suited. I'm probably not for the entrepreneur. I mean, it just probably can't afford my expertise that I, charge accordingly for. But it's the guy that's going through a lot of change. Either they're scaling up. Oh, they're trying to go from one warehouse to 15 warehouses, trying to go from 10 stores to 100 stores, that type of thing. Anyone who sees high growth coming up, or maybe they're just expanding their product line or something along those lines. I can add a lot of value there. On the larger companies, that's where I do kind of the senior project management. They have real projects that require someone to actually come in and that has expertise that can actually not only figure out how to solve the problem, but also knows how to interface with all of the other vice presidents at the company so he's not stepping on toes and everything and talk their language and know how to add value without making you be the problem or the distraction. And then the interim one is interesting. I've run companies probably as little as $5 million in sales and as big as 100 million on an interim basis. So it's probably in that area. Once they get above that, they generally will have someone that they have at their disposal that they can have run a division that's $250,000 in sales or something like that. But my sweet spot is probably between 5 million and 100 million in the interim aspect.
Great. So, how can for those who've watched this and said, "Look, I could use a guy like this," and we're at the skill. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, a couple of different ways. If you're on LinkedIn, you can go and connect with me. Happy to accept your connection. There's about 10 million John Matthews out there, so make sure you put in Greycat Enterprises as well, and then you'll find me. I've been on LinkedIn for 21 years, so you should probably see me there or be able to find me there. My website is graycatenterprises.com. So that's GRAY catenterprises.com. There you'll see my background. You'll see the Grey Cat Learning Series. You'll see my blog. You'll see case studies of clients that I've worked with. You'll actually see a deck that outlines specific projects that I've done. And you'll see the diversity of the projects that I've done. And then the last way, if you want to just email me directly, it's john.matthews, and it's That's john.matthews at greycatenterprises.com.
Well, that was great, John. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industry and accelerating innovation. So, as always, I'm your host, Serge Jubal, and I want to thank John Matthews, President and CEO of Greycat Enterprises, based out of North Carolina, for joining me today. It was a great conversation.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on, Serge.
Thanks, John. We'll talk soon. And for the rest of you, watch for the links coming through and John's contact information in the show notes as well.
Thank you.